Ladies and gentlemen, you know what's funny? Sometimes someone lets you go, walks away, ends things, and deep down, they still expect to have a place in your heart. They think they can check in, pop up, stay emotionally relevant without doing the emotional work. They let you go, but they didn't think you would actually let them go too. Letting go of someone who chose to leave is one of the most misunderstood acts of strength. People confuse silence with surrender, distance with defeat, and moving on with giving up. But in truth, when someone makes the decision to walk out of your life, whether gently or abruptly, choosing not to chase them is an act of incredible self-respect. We often hold on because we think that love means staying no matter what, that real love waits, that maybe, just maybe, they'll come back and realize what they lost. But love that's real isn't proven by how long you wait in pain. It's proven by how willing you are to honor what's right, even when your heart still aches. In the Bible, we are said to guard our hearts, not because we're meant to build walls, but because not everyone deserves full access to our soul. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for them and for you is to let go. When someone leaves you, especially someone you care deeply about, your instinct may be to internalize it. What did I do wrong? Why wasn't I enough? But sometimes it's not about what you lacked. It's about what they weren't ready to handle. Your love may have been pure, your intentions may have been real, but their departure doesn't define your worth. In fact, what defines you is what you choose to do next. And if you choose to stand in dignity, to take your broken heart and begin rebuilding your peace, that's not weakness, that's power. In the Bible, we are said to be fearfully and wonderfully made, and that truth doesn't suddenly stop being true just because someone failed to see your value. You are not less loved because they walked away. You are not less seen because they stopped looking. Sometimes people exit because their role in your story has reached its end. And while it may feel like rejection, it can actually be redirection. There is a kind of freedom that comes when you realize that the same person who left you doesn't get to define your future. They made their choice, but now you get to make yours. And if your choice is to release what is no longer aligned, if your choice is to forgive without reopening the door, if your choice is to stop bleeding for someone who wouldn't even hand you a bandage, that is the kind of strength heaven recognizes. In the Bible, we are said to forget the former things and not dwell on the past, because something new is coming. And you can't receive what's next while clinging to what's gone. Letting go doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you cared enough about yourself to stop staying stuck in a space love no longer lived. It means you are walking forward, not because you're over it, but because you're finally choosing to honor what God has put in you. People often expect to keep emotional access to you even after they've let you go. It's one of the most overlooked dynamics in a breakup. Someone ends the relationship, steps back, or disappears, but deep down, they still assume they'll be able to reach for you whenever they feel like it. They made a decision to walk away, yet somehow they believe the door will stay open. This is not always conscious, but it's real. They want freedom from the relationship without losing the benefits of your presence. And if you're not careful, you'll find yourself holding emotional space for someone who has already chosen to live outside of it. This kind of behavior isn't about love. It's about control, comfort, and ego. It's the desire to be missed without having to stay, to be wanted without having to give. And the reason so many people fall into the trap of keeping that emotional door open is because they confuse compassion with obligation. They think that staying emotionally available is somehow a sign of maturity or hope, when in reality, it often becomes a form of self-betrayal. In the Bible, we are said to not be unequally yoked, because two people can't walk together unless they are in agreement. Emotional access without emotional investment creates a gap, a space where confusion, pain, and false hope grow. Sometimes a person doesn't want to be with you, but they don't want you to stop wanting them either. They want to know that you're still there, still watching, still hoping, still aching, that you'll still answer the text, still pick up the call, still smile at the mention of their name. But if someone can let you go and still believe they have a place in your heart whenever they choose to return, they're not respecting your healing, they're holding it hostage. And you get to decide when that ends. We are not called to keep revisiting the door God has already closed. In the Bible, we are said to shake the dust off our feet when we're no longer welcomed or received, not because we are bitter, but because we are called to move forward. And if someone gave up their seat at your table, they don't get to keep sending signals from the sidelines, waiting for an invitation back into a space they abandoned. If your heart is healing, if your spirit is rebuilding, then access is sacred. You can forgive someone and still choose not to allow them back into your life. You can love someone from a distance without giving them a front row seat to your soul. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Not out of pettiness, but out of wisdom. Not to punish, but to protect. You are the gatekeeper of your peace. And peace is not a revolving door. Not everyone who exits should be allowed to re-enter just because they suddenly remembered what they lost. You're not obligated to hold space for someone who didn't choose you. That's a truth that feels harsh until you realize how much freedom it offers. When someone you cared for, prayed for, invested in, decides that they no longer want to walk life with you, it's natural to grieve. But what becomes unhealthy is when we carry the emotional weight of that person long after they've let go of us. Love can make us loyal beyond reason, but loyalty without reciprocity becomes a trap. You begin to shrink yourself for a relationship that no longer exists. You begin to entertain thoughts that keep your soul entangled with someone who has already emotionally checked out. But choosing not to carry someone who chose to walk away isn't cruelty, it's clarity. Some people may have walked away kindly, others with cold silence. But whether they left with words or with absence, the outcome is the same. They removed themselves, they made a decision. And yet, the unspoken expectation is that you'll still emotionally wait. Wait for them to reach out, wait for them to change their mind, wait for a reunion that they haven't even promised. That's not love, that's bondage. In the Bible, we are said to lay aside every weight that hinders us, and sometimes the weight is not just pain, it's people. People we weren't meant to keep carrying once the connection no longer serves our growth or purpose. There's a difference between compassion and captivity. You can have a heart that forgives, a heart that wishes them well, without holding space in your life for them to return whenever they choose. Space is sacred. Emotional space, mental space, spiritual space. It is where peace, joy, and purpose are cultivated. And when you leave a door open for someone who never had the intention of walking back through it, you create an invitation for emotional chaos to linger. In the Bible, we are said to not cast our pearls before swine. That doesn't mean we see others as less than. It means we learn the value of what we carry. Your time, your love, your energy, your vulnerability, that is precious. And when someone didn't choose you, when they decided to step back, you have every right, every responsibility to protect what's still yours. There's a subtle lie we tell ourselves in Heartbreak. Maybe if I stay open, they'll come back. Maybe if I keep loving them from afar, something will shift. But you are not required to become a holding place for someone else's indecision. You were not created to be an option or a backup plan. You're not a spiritual waiting room where someone gets to return only after they've explored every other route. In the Bible, we are said to let our yes be yes and our no be no. That includes how we guard our heart. If someone couldn't say yes to you when it mattered, you don't owe them access to the space you've had to heal and rebuild. One of the hardest truths to accept is that healing doesn't always come with closure. Sometimes you won't get the apology, you won't get the explanation, you won't get the moment where everything suddenly makes sense and the pain is wrapped up neatly. People leave without looking back. People hurt you and act like it never happened. People change their mind mid-story and expect you to understand. And if you're not careful, you'll let the absence of closure become the reason you delay your healing. But you were never meant to stay stuck in a season waiting for someone else to give you peace. There comes a point where you have to give it to yourself. In the Bible, we are said to seek peace and pursue it. It doesn't say wait for someone to hand it to you. It doesn't say to find it only once the past is resolved. Peace is something we go after, even when pieces of the story are missing, even when you still don't understand why they changed, even when their actions don't align with the love you thought was there. You're not called to carry unanswered questions forever. Sometimes healing means making peace with the fact that you won't know why and still choosing to move forward. We often believe that closure comes from conversation, that if we could just sit down and talk one more time, we'd feel better. But truthfully, closure doesn't come from their words. It comes from your decision. Your decision to stop needing a story to make sense before you let your heart breathe again. Your decision to stop rehearsing the what-ifs, the could-haves, and the whys. In the Bible, we are said to lean not on our own understanding, which is a hard thing to do when all you want is to understand what went wrong. But sometimes peace lives in the surrender, not the knowing. Some people will walk away and never look back. Not because you didn't matter, but because they don't have the capacity to face what they've done. And waiting for them to validate your pain will only keep you locked in a cycle that doesn't serve your future. You don't need their words to heal. You don't need their explanation to rise. The closure you're waiting for might actually be the boundaries you build, the forgiveness you extend for your own freedom, the prayer you whisper through tears, and the decision to stop checking who they've become without you. In the Bible, we are said to forget those things which are behind and press forward to what lies ahead. That's not about ignoring your pain. It's about refusing to let it anchor you. Closure isn't about everything being okay between you and them. It's about being okay within yourself. It's about trusting that even though you didn't get all the answers, God saw what happened. God knew the intentions, and that's enough. That's what sets you free. Letting someone go isn't always about anger. Sometimes it's simply about alignment. It's about recognizing that who they are now no longer fits with who you are becoming. The version of you that needed them doesn't exist anymore. The version of you that tolerated confusion, accepted breadcrumbs, hoped for change with no evidence, it's gone. Growth will always cost you something, and sometimes the cost is the comfort of someone you once thought you'd never release. But letting go doesn't mean the love wasn't real. It means the chapter ended, and you were wise enough not to keep rereading it, hoping the story would change. There's this pressure to always associate letting go with bitterness, as if choosing peace means you're holding a grudge. But sometimes, the most mature kind of love is quiet release. No fight, no drama, just a deep inner knowing that you can't carry someone who no longer fits the direction of your calling. In the Bible, we are said to walk in the Spirit. And when you start doing that, you'll feel it when certain people, places, or patterns no longer resonate with the journey you're on. You'll sense the disconnection long before it becomes visible. That's discernment. That's spiritual maturity. It doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be honest. The enemy will try to convince you that letting go is failure, that it's giving up. But there's a difference between giving up and giving it to God. You can surrender something without resenting it. You can walk away without malice in your heart. In fact, the Bible teaches us to guard our heart above all else. And sometimes the guard looks like a goodbye. You may still love them, still pray for them, still want the best for them, but that doesn't mean they get to walk with you into the next chapter. Some people were part of your preparation, not your destination. It takes strength to release someone who still has pieces of your heart. But if keeping them means compromising your peace, it's no longer love, it's attachment. An attachment rooted in fear of loss is never healthy. When God begins to elevate your life, you'll notice He also prunes it, not to punish you, but to protect you, not to deprive you, but to prepare you. There are connections you had that couldn't go where you're going, and that's not rejection, it's redirection. In the Bible, we are said that all things work together for good for those who love Him. Even the painful partings, even the tearful farewells, even the unanswered questions. You are not who you were when you first let them in. And that's a good thing. You're growing, you're healing, you're becoming. And in the process of becoming, you'll have to shed anything that slows your progress, even if it once felt like home, even if it still stings a little. Because when you finally start walking in the fullness of who God called you to be, you'll realize some losses were actually protection disguised as pain. Sometimes the most powerful healing doesn't happen when you get something back, but when you finally stop reaching for it. There comes a moment when your soul quietly understands that closure, clarity, and comfort don't have to come from the person who hurt you. They can come from within, from God, from a new level of self-respect, from realizing that you were never meant to beg someone to see your worth. You were meant to embody it, to walk in it, to protect it, even when that means walking away from what you once prayed to keep. In the Bible, we are said to be fearfully and wonderfully made. And when you really begin to believe that, you stop chasing people who treated your heart like an option. There's a version of you that stayed too long, that explained too much, that made excuses for disrespect just because love was involved. That version of you didn't know how to release someone who wasn't ready to love you the way you needed. But that version of you also taught you something. It taught you what your boundaries should be. It taught you what inconsistency feels like. It taught you how to pray through disappointment. It taught you how to rebuild yourself after heartbreak. And most importantly, it taught you that your healing cannot depend on someone else's return. People will walk away and expect you to stay broken. They'll let you go and assume they can revisit you whenever they feel nostalgic. But when you stop reaching, when you stop responding to their silence with open arms, when you stop romanticizing the idea of being chosen later, you take your power back. You stop being available for confusion. You stop negotiating your value. In the Bible, we are said to be transformed by the renewing of our mind. And that means healing often starts with how we think about ourselves, how we speak to ourselves, and what we allow ourselves to believe about love, loss, and self-worth. There's a quiet confidence that comes when you no longer need someone to come back in order to feel whole. You wake up and realize that the absence didn't destroy you. It refined you. It stripped away your illusions. It exposed your fears, and then it invited you into a deeper trust with God. In the Bible, we are said to cast all our cares on Him because He cares for us. And that includes the ache of rejection, the pain of letting go, and the confusion of being left behind. You don't have to keep reaching back to someone who let go of your hand. Healing is not about chasing closure. It's about choosing wholeness. You stop waiting for them to fix what they broke and instead let God rebuild you from the inside out. And in that rebuilding, you find a version of yourself that no longer fits the patterns of the past, a version of you that loves deeper, but also guards wiser, a version of you that doesn't reach, because what's meant for you won't have to be chased,